The first time my son looked me in the eyes and lied, I told myself he was just afraid. The second time, I convinced myself he was under pressure. But the day I discovered that he had secretly transferred my inheritance into his own name while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, there were no excuses left to make. I wasn't just betrayed, I was erased. The house my late wife and I spent 40 years building, the savings we sacrificed vacations for, the legacy meant to protect future generations. All of it had been taken by the one person I trusted more than anyone else. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He smiled. "You weren't going to need it anyway," he said. Those 7 words changed everything. He believed I was too old, too weak, and too heartbroken to fight back. He thought money had given him power, and power had made him untouchable. What he didn't know was that I had already made one final decision, a decision that would expose every lie, restore every ounce of my dignity, and teach him a lesson that no amount of wealth could ever erase. By the time my story was over, my son would realize that stealing an inheritance was the smallest mistake he had made. I didn't lose my inheritance. I watched my own son steal it. Those were the first words I managed to whisper, as I stared at the stack of legal documents spread across my kitchen table. My hands trembled, not because of my age, but because every signature on those papers carried my name. Except I had never signed them. The son I had raised with love, sacrificed for, and trusted with every piece of my heart had secretly taken everything my late wife and I spent a lifetime building. The family home, my savings, the inheritance that was meant to honor generations before us. It was all gone. When I confronted him, I expected denial. Instead, he smiled. "You weren't going to need it much longer anyway." In that moment, something inside me changed forever. He believed I was too old to fight back. He believed I would stay silent to protect the family. Most of all, he believed money had made him untouchable. He couldn't have been more wrong, because while he was celebrating what he thought was the biggest victory of his life, I was quietly making one final decision that would expose every lie, uncover every secret, and turn his perfect plan into his greatest nightmare. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next is something neither my son nor anyone in my family ever saw coming. My name is William Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that if you worked hard, kept your word, and loved your family without conditions, everything else would somehow fall into place. For 43 years, my wife, Eleanor, and I built a simple but meaningful life together. We weren't wealthy by the standards of the world, but we were rich in the things that mattered. We owned a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood, saved every extra dollar we could, and dreamed of leaving something valuable behind for our children, not just money, but an example of honesty, sacrifice, and integrity. When Eleanor passed away after a long battle with cancer, the silence inside the house became almost unbearable. Every room carried a memory. Her favorite chair still faced the garden she loved. Her coffee mug remained on the highest shelf because I couldn't bring myself to move it. Some mornings, I still caught myself making 2 cups of coffee before remembering that I would be drinking alone. Our son, Daniel, became my closest family after her death. At least, that's what I believed. He visited often during those first months. He brought groceries, helped with repairs around the house, and insisted that I shouldn't worry about paperwork or finances while I was grieving. He told me to focus on healing and let him handle the complicated details. "Dad," he would say with a reassuring smile, "Mom would want me to take care of you." Those words comforted me more than I can describe. Looking back now, I realize trust is sometimes the easiest door for betrayal to walk through. As the months passed, Daniel became more involved in every part of my life. He offered to organize my bills, drove me to medical appointments, and even convinced me to let him keep copies of important legal documents in case of an emergency. Every suggestion sounded practical. Every decision seemed responsible. Friends occasionally warned me not to hand over too much control. One neighbor even joked, "Be careful, Will. Money changes people." I laughed it off. "Not my son," I replied. "I raised him better than that." I truly believed those words. Then, one winter morning, everything changed. I slipped on an icy driveway while collecting the newspaper and fractured my hip. The injury required surgery, followed by weeks of rehabilitation. For the first time in my life, I couldn't manage things on my own. Daniel stepped in immediately. "I'll take care of everything," he promised. "You just focus on getting better." While I lay in a hospital bed recovering, he handled my mail, met with my attorney, spoke to my financial advisor, and managed every document that arrived at the house. The nurses often told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted son. I agreed. I had no reason not to. Weeks later, after returning home, I noticed small things that didn't seem right. Some bank statements were missing. A few important files had been moved. When I asked Daniel about them, he brushed off my concerns with confident answers. "Just routine paperwork, Dad. Nothing for you to worry about." I wanted to believe him, but late one evening, while searching for an insurance policy, I discovered a folder hidden beneath several boxes in my home office. Inside were documents I had never seen before. At the bottom of the stack was a property transfer agreement bearing what appeared to be my signature. The only problem was, I had never signed it. For several minutes, I simply stared at the document. My name was printed neatly beneath a signature that looked almost identical to my own. The date matched the week I had been in the hospital recovering from surgery. According to the paperwork, I had voluntarily transferred ownership of my home to Daniel. It made no sense. I turned every page, hoping I had misunderstood something. Instead, I found more documents. There were changes to investment accounts, updates to beneficiary forms, and letters addressed to financial institutions that I had never written. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Someone hadn't made a mistake. Someone had planned this. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the second ring. "Everything okay, Dad?" His voice was calm, almost cheerful. "I found some papers," I said carefully. "Can you come over?" There was a brief pause. "Sure, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt longer than the weeks I had spent in the hospital. I placed every document neatly on the dining room table and waited. When Daniel walked in, he smiled as if nothing were wrong. "You wanted to see me." I pointed toward the papers. "What are these?" His smile disappeared for only a second before returning. "Oh, those! Don't those me! Why does this say I transferred my house to you?" He pulled out a chair and sat down, completely relaxed. "I was going to explain everything eventually, then explain it now." He folded his hands together. "You were recovering from surgery. The doctors weren't sure how much independence you'd have afterward. I thought it would be easier if everything was already in my name." "You thought?" "It was for the family's protection. My protection doesn't require forging my signature." His expression hardened. "You can't prove that." Those 5 words hit harder than any punch ever could. I searched his face, hoping to find guilt, regret, or even fear. There was nothing. Only confidence. "I trusted you," I whispered. "And you still should." No. For the first time in my life, I looked at my own son and realized I didn't know the man standing in front of me. He stood and gathered a few of the papers. "You've been under a lot of stress, Dad. You're confused. I know exactly what I'm looking at. You should stop digging before you make things worse." "Worse for who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the front door. Before leaving, he turned back. "Remember, legally, this house isn't yours anymore." The door closed behind him. I sat alone in absolute silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory of Daniel replayed in my mind. His offers to help, his insistence on handling my paperwork, his constant reminders that I should leave everything to him. None of it had been kindness. It had been preparation. The next morning, I drove to my bank. The manager greeted me politely, but the moment she pulled up my accounts, her expression changed. Mr. Carter, according to our records, you no longer have authorization over several of these accounts. What do you mean? They were transferred weeks ago. Transferred to whom? She hesitated before turning the monitor toward me. There it was, Daniel Carter. The balance represented nearly every dollar Eleanor and I had spent 40 years saving. I felt dizzy. Who approved this? She opened another file. We received notarized authorization forms. I never signed them. The manager looked genuinely concerned. If that's true, Mr. Carter, this may involve fraud. Fraud. The word echoed in my mind, not a misunderstanding, not a family disagreement. Fraud. As I gathered copies of the records, the manager quietly handed me one final envelope. This arrived yesterday, she said. It was addressed to you, but someone requested that it be held. I opened it immediately. Inside was a notice from my attorney. It informed me that a new will had recently been submitted, a will that completely removed me from controlling my own estate. At the bottom of the page was a witness's signature. The witness wasn't a stranger. It belonged to someone I had trusted almost as much as my son, my own brother. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My own brother, the same man who had stood beside me at Eleanor's funeral. The same man who had promised to look after me if I ever needed help. The same man who had spent countless holidays around our dinner table. His signature was right there beneath the witness line. I drove straight to his house. He opened the door with a smile, but the moment he saw the papers in my hand, the color drained from his face. William, what are you doing here? I think you know. I held up the document. Tell me why your name is on this. He looked away. I can explain, then explain. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he stepped aside and invited me in. I never wanted it to happen like this, he said quietly. What happened? Daniel came to me while you were in the hospital. He said the doctors believed your memory was getting worse. He told me you wanted everything transferred before it was too late. And you believed him. He showed me paperwork he created. My brother lowered his head. I know that now. You signed anyway. I thought I was helping. His voice trembled, but the damage had already been done. Helping, that single word felt like another betrayal. You never called me. I should have. You never asked me. I know. You never even wondered why your own brother wasn't present when he supposedly signed away everything he owned. He couldn't answer. The silence said enough. As I walked toward the door, he spoke again. William, I stopped. Daniel wasn't acting alone. I slowly turned around. What do you mean? There were other people involved. My stomach tightened. The lawyer who prepared the documents.
The notary.
Someone at the financial office. Daniel kept saying he had everything under control. Who else knows? I don't know everyone. What aren't you telling me? He looked ashamed. He said he needed my signature because there would be an investigation if anything looked suspicious. My heart sank. An investigation. Daniel had expected questions long before anyone discovered the truth. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a carefully planned scheme. Over the next week, I hired an attorney specializing in financial fraud. After reviewing every document, she leaned back in her chair. Mr. Carter, tell me the truth. This wasn't just theft. What was it? It appears someone spent months creating a complete legal trail to make these transfers look legitimate. Can we stop it? We can try. Try, she sighed. The paperwork is convincing. Your signatures appear consistent. Witnesses signed the documents. Assets have already been everything, unless we prove fraud. How? Evidence. That one word became my entire life. Every receipt, every email, every text message, every hospital record, every security camera, every phone call. I searched through boxes Eleanor had carefully organized years earlier. I requested bank records, medical records, visitor logs from the hospital, and copies of surveillance footage from businesses where signatures had supposedly been notarized. Days turned into weeks. The deeper we looked, the stranger everything became. Then one afternoon, my attorney called. "We found something." "What is it?" "The notary who certified your signature wasn't even in the state on the day the document was supposedly signed." For the first time, hope returned. If one document was false, others could fall apart too. But before we could celebrate, another call came. This time it wasn't from my attorney. It was from the county courthouse. "Mr. Carter, we've received notice that your son has filed a petition claiming you're no longer mentally competent to manage your affairs." I froze. "What?" "If the court agrees, a temporary guardian could be appointed immediately." "A guardian?" "Yes, and who requested to become my guardian?" There was a brief pause. The clerk answered softly. "Your son, Daniel Carter. The papers he stole were never his real goal. He wasn't just trying to take my inheritance. He was trying to take my freedom. And unless I could stop him before the hearing, the court might hand him complete control over the rest of my life." The notice from the courthouse sat on my kitchen table for 2 days. Every time I looked at it, I heard Daniel's voice echoing in my mind. "You weren't going to need it much longer anyway." For weeks I had been reacting to his moves. He forged documents. I searched for evidence. He emptied accounts. I contacted the bank. He filed for guardianship. I hired another lawyer. Then, on the third morning, I looked at a framed photograph of Eleanor on the mantel. She had always said, "When someone pushes you into a corner, don't panic. Make them believe they've already won." That was the moment everything changed. I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like someone determined to uncover the entire truth. My attorney, Rebecca Lawson, agreed. "If Daniel believes you're confused," she said, "don't convince him otherwise." "You want me to pretend?" "I want him to keep talking." So I did. When Daniel called to ask how I was doing, I sounded tired and defeated. "I don't know what's happening anymore," I told him. "You've been under a lot of stress, Dad." "I suppose you're right." For the first time since this nightmare began, he relaxed. He believed I was giving up. He even offered to stop by the house and help organize my remaining paperwork. I accepted. What he didn't know was that Rebecca had arranged for a licensed forensic document examiner, a private investigator, and 2 digital forensic specialists to review every file connected to my estate. While Daniel believed I was surrendering, an entirely different story was unfolding. The investigators soon uncovered something shocking. The signatures on the property transfer, the investment accounts, and the revised will had all been created using 3 different methods. Some were carefully traced from old documents. Others appeared to have been copied from scanned records. A few had been signed by someone attempting to imitate my handwriting. None of them were genuine. Then another discovery surfaced. Security footage from a local shipping store showed Daniel mailing legal documents on a day when I was still recovering in the rehabilitation center. The timestamps matched hospital visitor logs, proving I had never left my room. The timeline didn't fit his story. But the biggest breakthrough came from somewhere completely unexpected. One afternoon, I received a call from a woman named Melissa. She introduced herself as Daniel's former assistant. "I think you deserve to know the truth," she said. We met the following morning. She placed a small flash drive on the table between us. "I worked for your son for almost 3 years. Why are you helping me?" "Because I quit after I discovered what he was doing." My heart raced. "What did you discover?" "He wasn't just planning to take your inheritance." She looked directly into my eyes. He'd been planning it for over a year. She explained that Daniel had secretly consulted attorneys, searched for ways to gain control of elderly parents' estates, and discussed creating documents that would appear legitimate if anyone questioned them. Then she said something that stunned me. Your hospital stay wasn't part of his original plan. What do you mean? He told people it simply created the perfect opportunity. I felt sick. The accident that had left me vulnerable hadn't caused the betrayal. It had only made carrying it out easier. Melissa handed the flash drive to Rebecca. It contains emails, internal notes, appointment calendars, and recorded conversations. Rebecca examined the files carefully. This could change everything. Over the next several days, experts authenticated every document and every recording. One recording captured Daniel speaking with a business associate. I just need the transfers finished before my father starts asking questions, he said. Another voice asked, what if he fights back? Daniel laughed. He won't. Everyone thinks he's getting forgetful. There it was, his entire plan. Not confusion, not concern, manipulation. For months, he had quietly convinced people that I was losing my memory, so they would question my credibility before I even realized what had happened. Every lie had been calculated. Every conversation had served a purpose. Every act of kindness had been part of the performance. Rebecca closed the final file and smiled for the first time since taking my case. We have enough. Enough for what? Enough to expose every forged document. Enough to challenge the guardianship petition. Enough to recover your property. She paused. And enough to make everyone involved answer under oath. The court hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Daniel believed he was walking into a courtroom where an elderly father would be declared incapable of managing his own affairs. Instead, he was about to walk into a room filled with experts, witnesses, authenticated evidence, and one final surprise he never imagined. He thought the hearing would give him complete control over my life. He had no idea it was about to become the day his entire world fell apart. The courtroom was silent as Daniel walked through the doors. He looked confident. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed. His attorney carried a thick folder, and Daniel greeted a few people with the smile of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. He barely looked at me. To him, I was no longer his father. I was simply the final obstacle standing between him and everything I owned. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The hearing began with Daniel's attorney, arguing that I was no longer mentally capable of managing my affairs. He spoke of my age, my recent surgery, and my supposed confusion. He presented the forged documents as proof that I had willingly transferred my assets before my health declined. For a moment, the courtroom was completely still. Then my attorney stood. Your Honor, Rebecca said calmly, before we discuss my client's competency, I believe the court should first examine how these documents came to exist. One by one, she presented the evidence. The forensic handwriting expert testified that the signatures were fraudulent. The hospital administrator confirmed that I had never left my room on the dates I supposedly signed legal documents. Security footage showed Daniel mailing the paperwork while I was recovering. The bank manager explained how unusual the transfers had been. Finally, Melissa took the witness stand. The courtroom listened in complete silence as she described the meetings, the planning, and the conversations she had witnessed. Then Rebecca played the recording. Daniel's own voice filled the courtroom. I just need the transfers finished before my father starts asking questions. A second voice asked, what if he fights back? Daniel laughed. He won't. Everyone thinks he's getting forgetful. The recording ended. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. For the first time that morning, Daniel's confidence disappeared. His attorney whispered frantically beside him, but there was nothing left to explain. The evidence spoke for itself. The judge looked directly at Daniel. Would you like to respond to these allegations? Daniel stood slowly. He looked toward me. Then, for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in his eyes. He tried to deny everything. He blamed misunderstandings. He blamed paperwork. He blamed other people. But every excuse collapsed under another piece of evidence. By the end of the hearing, the truth was impossible to ignore. The judge dismissed the guardianship petition immediately. Every disputed transfer was frozen pending final judgment. A criminal investigation into the forged documents was ordered. The courtroom erupted into quiet conversation. It was over, but I wasn't finished. As people began gathering their belongings, I asked the judge for permission to speak. He nodded. I stood, looking not at the lawyers or the spectators, but at my son. When your mother was alive, I began, she used to tell me that wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by the kind of person you become. Daniel lowered his eyes. I spent my life trying to give you opportunities I never had. I worked overtime. I missed birthdays because I was earning money for your future. Your mother and I sacrificed countless dreams so yours could become reality. I paused. I thought I was leaving you an inheritance, but I realized today that I failed to leave you something even more valuable: character. Tears filled the eyes of several people in the courtroom. I can recover my house. I can recover my savings. But the trust you stole from me, that may never return. Daniel finally looked up. His face was wet with tears. I'm sorry, Dad. Those words were the apology I had waited months to hear, but they came far too late. I forgive you, I said quietly. The courtroom became completely silent. His eyes widened. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't rewrite the truth, and it doesn't restore the years it takes to rebuild trust. A few weeks later, the court ruled entirely in my favor. My home was returned. My bank accounts were restored. The fraudulent will was declared invalid. The forged documents were canceled, and everyone involved in the scheme faced the legal consequences of their actions. I updated my estate plan, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Part of my estate would now support scholarships for hardworking students and charities that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. The rest would be distributed only under conditions that reflected the values Eleanor and I had spent our lives trying to teach. Today, when people ask me if I regret fighting back, my answer is always the same. No, because standing up for yourself is not an act of revenge. It is an act of self-respect. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we love the deepest. But love should never require surrendering your dignity. Money can build houses. It can buy comfort. It can create opportunity. But it will never replace integrity. In the end, my greatest inheritance was never the money I protected. It was the lesson I refused to let die. Trust is precious. Character is priceless, and no fortune is worth sacrificing your soul. If you've stayed with me until this moment, I hope you understand that this story was never just about an inheritance. It was about trust, family, and the painful realization that the people we love can sometimes make the choices that hurt us the most. For a long time, I believed my greatest loss was the money my son tried to take. I was wrong. The greatest loss was believing that love alone could protect a family from greed. But my greatest victory wasn't winning in court. It was refusing to let bitterness define the rest of my life. I chose justice instead of revenge. I chose truth instead of silence. And most importantly, I chose peace instead of hatred. Life will test every one of us. Some people will betray your trust. Some will underestimate your strength. Others may think they have already defeated you. But never forget this. Your circumstances do not define your future. Your response does. Stand up for what is right, even when you're standing alone. Protect your dignity. Never allow fear to silence your voice. And remember that true wealth is not measured by the money in your bank account, but by the honesty in your heart, the courage in your spirit, and the legacy you leave behind. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that integrity always outlives deception, truth always outlasts lies, and justice may take time, but it has a way of finding those who never give up. Because in the end, The most valuable inheritance you can ever leave your children isn't money. It's the example of a life lived with honor.